Hey guys, welcome to the studio. Come on in. I'm continuing with my discussion on buses used for mixing and how you might use a bus. In my last video, you can catch that right here at this link, I discussed about grouping my instruments using buses. It makes it easy. You can see I've got all my drum channels right here, and I've got that coming over to a main master drum bus. And it allows me to take several channels and mix them down into one, and then I can go ahead and combine all those tracks down to one, and then the output of this bus goes into the master. Here I've got 4 channels dedicated for my bass. I've got my 2 guitars here. So it gives me a master control. But like I say, I discussed that in my last video. And what I'd like to get into more is talking about using buses for an effect, or with effects, however you want to look at it. But there's a couple of reasons why I would use a bus in this scenario. And specifically, if you look at this bus right here on the far right, this is dedicated for a reverb. I've got a instance of a reverb here. I'm using the Cakewalk Reverb. And let me just show you why I've got this window open. I've got this set to the signal that's going through it is totally wet. As you're only hearing the output of the reverb, and I'm not hearing any of the dry signal that's going into it. So basically, the output of this channel is just total reverb. Now, if you look over here into my instrument sections here, I've got these channels set up with sends, and they're all post fader, meaning that as I pull the fader down, that the ratio of the reverb being, the ratio of that signal being sent to the reverb is the same. But I'll get into sends in another video. But I'm sending the dry signal over to the reverb. The reverb supplies the wet, and then the output of the reverb goes into the master. Now the output of these channels, the main output goes into the master, so that gives me my dry signal. So that's why I leave this totally on wet and then this on the dry. Now, a reason that I would want to have a reverb on a dedicated bus like this, there's 2 reasons that I can think of that come to mind. First of all, if your computer's struggling a little bit or a little older, I could certainly put this reverb on each individual channel, but then I would have an instance of reverb on each channel here. I'd have 5 reverbs versus just 1 reverb, so I would have 5 instances of that plug-in. That may not sound like a lot, but if you're starting to ramp up your track count and get 20, 30, 40 tracks, that's a way to cut down on your plug-ins and the load on your computer. So it helps your CPU out a little bit and keeps things running smoothly there. Another reason is should all these instruments be recorded live, these are all virtual instruments for the most part, except for my guitars, they would be recorded in the same room, and they would have the same type of reverb on them naturally because they're all in the same room. So therefore I'm giving the same type of reverb covering over these instruments here, and that would help to glue them together or help to give them a commonality to them that would help glue the mix together, so to speak. Now I've got on my bass channels, let me scoot over to that, these guys right here, these 4 channels. Let me turn this up a little bit. I've got the same sort of thing going on here, but it's a little bit different. Rather than it going to a separate dedicated bus, I've got the four bass tracks going to a bus on the with a master fader. And then I put an effect in the FX bin there, and I'm using this chorus. And if I were to bypass that chorus, and then back on. But the same sort of thing, I could put a chorus on each of these instruments here, each of these tracks, but this way I'm able to consolidate. I like the sound of my combined tracks, which by the way, I've got that sound combined with that sound. But that way, if I already like the combined sound that I have here, I can just go ahead and put one effect over that entire track, or that entire sound. Now let me get to an instance here to where it's a little bit different. And let me roll over to the drums here. On the snare drum, I'm going to fly that out. I'm going to solo the drums. Bring it up a little bit. And I'm going to fly out my Pro channel in Sonar. And I've got another instance of the reverb. Another reverb. And this is just going on the snare only. I turn it off. Now I'm not using a bus for this reverb, but I'm just wanting to show you the difference in that I can apply a slightly different reverb. Remember, the other reverb was a hall reverb, and then I've got a little bit more of a room sound on this particular snare that I thought sounded best. Now I could just as easily put another instance or another bus with just a room sound reverb, which is very common, and then I could send a couple of other channels into it, but in this particular mix so far, all I wanted was just the snare coming on that. But I hope that clears up any questions that you might have on using buses, especially for using them for effects and with effects, and how you might use them. I appreciate you checking out the video, and we'll see you in the next one, guys. Take care.